The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a pale glow over the cracked vinyl booths and the linoleum floor worn smooth by years of hurried steps. It was 10:47 p.m., and the Manhattan street outside was quiet save for the occasional hum of a passing cab. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried onions, a comforting staleness that Ethan Brooks sought out when the weight of his world became too much. He sat in his usual corner booth, his tailored gray suit jacket draped over the seat, his tie loosened, and his laptop open to a spreadsheet that blurred into meaningless numbers. As the CEO of Brooks Technologies, a company valued at over $1 billion, Ethan was used to late nights, but tonight, the city's demands felt heavier than usual. The diner was nearly empty, its only other occupant a man in a trucker hat nursing a milkshake at the counter. Ethan barely noticed him, his attention drifting to the clink of dishes from the kitchen and the soft shuffle of footsteps approaching his table. Ava Bennett, the waitress who'd served him for months, appeared with a steaming coffee pot, her movements brisk but silent, as if she'd learned to exist without drawing attention. Her brown hair fell in loose waves, half hiding her face, and her navy apron was tied tightly over a faded black sweater. She poured his coffee with steady hands, the dark liquid filling the chipped mug without a single spill. "Thanks," Ethan said, his voice low, his eyes still on the screen. Ava nodded, already turning away, but as she moved, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a glimpse of her wrist. Ethan's gaze caught on it, a cluster of purple bruises, stark against her pale skin, shaped like fingerprints. His breath hitched, the spreadsheet forgotten. He looked up, catching her eyes for a fleeting moment before she yanked her sleeve down, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. His voice was clear, steady, but carried a weight that filled the quiet diner. Ava froze, her back to him, her shoulders stiffening. "I'm fine," she said, too quickly, her tone sharp enough to cut. She didn't turn, didn't meet his gaze, but the tremor in her hand betrayed her. Ethan leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his instincts warring between respect and concern. He'd been coming to this diner for nearly a year, seeking its anonymity, its distance from the polished world of boardrooms and gala dinners. Ava was part of that refugee quiet, efficient, always fading into the background. They'd exchanged few words beyond his usual order of coffee and pie, but he'd noticed her, the way she avoided small talk, the way her eyes darted to the door when the bell chimed. And now, these bruises, vivid and undeniable, told a story she wouldn't. "Your coffee's getting cold," Ava said, her voice flat, starting to walk away. Ethan reached out, his hand hovering near her elbow, not touching but close enough to stop her. "Wait," he said, softer now. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. But if you need help, I'm here." Her eyes flicked to his, dark and guarded, a storm brewing behind them. For a moment, he thought she might speak, might let the wall crack. But then a shadow loomed beside the table. Luis Alvarez, the diner's cook, stood there, a dish towel slung over his broad shoulder, his tattooed arms crossed. His dark eyes narrowed at Ethan, protective and unyielding. "Everything okay over here?" he asked, his voice low, his gaze fixed on Ethan's hand near Ava. Double quotes, "Fine, Luis," Ava said quickly, stepping back. "Mr. Brooks was just asking about the daily special." Luis didn't move, his skepticism clear, but he nodded slowly. "10 minutes till closing, Ava. I'll start cleaning up back there." He shot Ethan one last look before disappearing into the kitchen, the swing door creaking. Behind him, Ethan exhaled, leaning back in the booth. He pulled a business card from his wallet, simple, white, with Ethan Brooks, CEO, Brooks Technologies embossed in black, and slid it across the table. "I'm not some random guy," he said, meeting Ava's guarded stare. If you are in trouble, you can call me." Ava's eyes flashed, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "I'm not your charity case," she said, her words alive with fire. "And I'm not in trouble. Please, just leave it alone." Ethan raised his hands in surrender, his heart pounding. He wasn't used to being dismissed, not with his name, his wealth, his influence. But Ava's defiance wasn't about his status. It was about her pride, her need to stand on her own. He nodded, returning to his laptop, though the numbers no longer held his focus. He typed absently, stealing glances as Ava cleared tables, her movements swift and deliberate, her sleeve now pulled firmly over her wrist. 30 minutes later, the diner's lights dimmed, signaling closing time. Ethan packed his laptop and stepped into the cool night air, the city's pulse a distant hum. He crossed the street to his black sedan, its driver, Marcus, waiting patiently. But instead of leaving, Ethan lingered, leaning against the car, his eyes on the diner's glass door. Louis left first, his jacket slung over his shoulder, disappearing down the block. Then Ava emerged, locking the front door with a jangle of keys, her breath visible in the chilly air. She pulled her coat tight, her head down, and started walking toward the subway. Ethan hesitated, then crossed the street, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. "Ava!" he called, his voice softer than he intended. She jumped, spinning to face him, her keys clutched like a weapon in her fist. "Are you following me now?" she asked, her voice sharp, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and anger. "No," Ethan said, raising his hands again. "Yes, I wanted to apologize properly. I overstepped. But I've seen bruises like that before, and they're not nothing." Ava's posture softened, but only slightly. Her eyes glistened in the streetlight, and she looked up at the darkening sky, as if searching for answers in the stars. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "Then help me understand," Ethan replied, his tone gentle but firm. He took a step closer, careful not to crowd her. She sighed, a deep, shuddering sound, and wiped a stray tear from her cheek. "It's not what you think," she said finally. "It's my brother, Noah. He was in the military. Afghanistan. Iraq. He has PTSD. Sometimes he has episodes, and he doesn't know it's me. He doesn't mean to, but—" She trailed off, her hand brushing her wrist, the gesture unconscious but heavy. Ethan's chest tightened, a flood of images rushing. Through his mind, dusty compounds, the crack of gunfire, a soldier's weight shielding him from an explosion. He pushed the memory down, focusing on Ava. "That's rough," he said, his voice steady. "Is he getting help?" Ava laughed bitterly, the sound raw and hollow. "On a waitress's salary? We were on a VA wait list for months, but he refused to go. He's all I have left." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He wanted to offer solutions, doctors, resources, anything. But her earlier words echoed, "I'm not your charity case." Instead, he said, "What's his name?" "Noah Bennett," Ava said, her voice softening as she spoke his name. "He was Special Forces, saved lives over there. Now, he can barely leave our apartment." Ethan's breath caught, a chill running through him. "Noah Bennett," he repeated, the name stirring something deep, a memory he couldn't place. He took a step back, his mind spinning. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push." Ava studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if sensing his shift. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice quiet but piercing. Ethan didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. He only knew that her bruises, her pain, had cracked. Something in the polished surface of his life. "I just do," he said finally. "I'll leave you alone now. But the card, it's there if you need it." She didn't respond, her keys still clutched tightly as she turned and walked away, her figure shrinking into the city's shadows. Ethan watched until she disappeared, then slid into his car, his heart pounding. Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing, pulling into traffic as Ethan's phone buzzed with an email from Rebecca Larson, his CFO. Board meeting tomorrow. Project glitch worsening. Be there. Ethan silenced the phone, his thoughts elsewhere. Noah Bennett. The name tugged at him, a thread connecting to a past he buried under years of success. He leaned back, the city lights streaking past, and felt the weight of Ava's words settle into him. A soldier broken by war, a sister carrying his pain, and a question, "Are you okay?" that had opened a door he wasn't sure he could close. The city was a restless beast at dawn, its skyline jagged against a sky bruised with clouds. Ethan Brooks stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, the glass cold against his palm, his reflection a faint ghost over the Manhattan sprawl. He hadn't slept, not after Ava Bennett's words in the diner's shadowed parking lot. Noah Bennett. Special Forces. PTSD. The name had haunted him, a splinter lodged in his memory, tugging at a past he'd sealed away behind boardroom doors and billion-dollar deals. He sipped his coffee, the bitterness grounding him, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the crack of gunfire, the weight of a soldier's body shielding him from an explosion 3 years ago. His phone buzzed on the desk, snapping him back. An email from Rebecca Larson, his CFO, marked urgent. Project Nexus glitch escalating. Board expects answers at 10 a.m. Ethan ignored it, opening his laptop instead. He typed Noah Bennett Special Forces into a secure database, one he'd used to track military contacts for Brooks Technologies defense contracts. The results loaded slowly, each second tightening the knot in his chest. A profile appeared. Staff Sergeant Noah Bennett, Special Forces discharged honorably. 2022. Deployments: Afghanistan, Iraq. Injuries: shrapnel wounds. Back, 2022. A grainy photo showed a man with sharp features, a scar above his right eyebrow, and eyes that held a quiet intensity. Ethan's breath caught. It was him, the soldier who tackled him into a bunker, taking shrapnel meant for Ethan's spine. The memory surged, unbidden and vivid. A dusty compound in a classified zone. Ethan demonstrating a drone prototype for military brass. The attack came without warning: mortar fire, screams, chaos. A soldier had slammed into him, shouting, "Get down!" as debris rained. Ethan had felt the man's body shudder, a gasp of pain, then nothing but dust and blood. When the medics pulled them apart, the soldier was gone, whisked to a field hospital. Ethan had searched for him after, driven by a debt he couldn't name, but the man had vanished after discharge. Until now. Noah Bennett, Ava's brother, broken by war, leaving. Bruises on his sister's skin. Ethan closed the laptop, his hands trembling. He needed to see Ava, to tell her, to offer something, anything to ease the pain she carried alone. He grabbed his coat and headed for the diner, the city's pulse a dull roar in his ears. The diner was busier at mid-morning, its booth filled with delivery drivers and retirees, the air thick with the sizzle of bacon and the clatter of plates. Ava moved through the chaos with quiet efficiency, her hair pulled back, her sleeve carefully covering her wrist. She didn't notice Ethan until he slid into his usual booth, his presence drawing curious glances from other patrons. She approached, coffee pot in hand, her expression guarded. "You're early," she said, pouring his coffee without meeting his eyes. "I need to talk to you," Ethan said, his voice low, urgent. "About Noah." Ava's hand faltered, coffee sloshing slightly. "I told you to leave it alone," she whispered, her eyes flashing with warning. "I can't," Ethan said, leaning forward. "Noah Bennett, he saved my life 3 years ago, in a conflict zone. I was there for a tech demo when we were attacked. He pushed me into a bunker, took shrapnel in his back. That's when he was injured, Ava. I've been looking for him ever since. Ava's face drained of color, the coffee pot trembling in her grip. She set it down, her hands clenching into fists. "You're lying," she said, her voice barely audible. "Why would you say that?" "I'm not lying," Ethan said, pulling out his phone to show the database profile. "Look, Staff Sergeant Noah Bennett. That's him, isn't it?" Ava glanced at the screen, her eyes widening, then narrowing with anger. "So what?" she snapped, her voice low to avoid attention. "You think you owe him? You think you can swoop in, throw money at us, and fix everything? We're not your redemption project." Ethan flinched, her words cutting deeper than he expected. "It's not about redemption," he said, his voice steady despite the sting. "I owe him my life. And you're carrying his pain alone. I know. People, doctors, specialists. I can help him get treatment." Ava's jaw tightened, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We don't need your charity," she said, echoing her words from last night. "Noah's my family. I've been handling it." "You shouldn't have to handle it alone," Ethan said, his tone softening. "Let me help, for Noah's sake, not mine." Before Ava could respond, Luis Alvarez emerged from the kitchen, his dish towel slung over his shoulder, his gaze sharp. "Problem here, Ava?" he asked, his voice edged with suspicion as he glared at Ethan. "No problem," Ava said quickly, stepping back. "Mr. Brooks was just leaving." Ethan held her gaze for a moment, then nodded, sliding his business card across the table again. "Think about it," he said, standing. "I'm not going anywhere." Luis watched him leave, his arms crossed. "What's with that guy?" he asked Ava as Ethan's sedan pulled away. "He's been here too much lately." "He's just a customer," Ava said, pocketing the card, her voice flat. But her hand shook as she cleared Ethan's untouched. Coffee, her mind reeling. Noah, saving a billionaire's life. It sounded like a cruel twist of fate, a story too neat to be true. Yet the photo on Ethan's phone, the scar above Noah's eyebrow, it was real. And so were the bruises on her wrist, the sleepless nights, the fear that Noah was slipping away. That evening, Ava sat in her cramped apartment, the fluorescent light flickering above the kitchen table. The space was small but clean, its walls bare except for a faded photo of her and Noah with their parents, taken before the car accident that stole them away. Noah was asleep on the couch, his large frame curled tightly, a bottle of pills on the coffee table. Ava traced the bruises on her wrist, her fingers lingering on the tender skin. Ethan's offer echoed in her mind: doctors, specialists, a chance for Noah to heal. But accepting it meant opening her life to a man she barely knew, a man whose world of wealth and power felt like a trap. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena Torres, her coworker at the diner. "You okay?" Louis said that rich guy was back. "Be careful." Ava didn't reply, her thoughts drifting to Noah's episodes. The way his eyes turned vacant, his hands lashing out, mistaking her for an enemy. Last night's episode had been milder, but the one before had left a bruise on her arm, a secret she hid under long sleeves. She couldn't keep doing this alone, not forever. She pulled Ethan's card from her pocket, its edges already worn, from her restless fingers. She typed his number, then deleted it, her heart pounding. Finally, she dialed, her voice trembling as he answered on the second ring. "Ethan," she said, her tone firm despite her fear. "If you're serious about helping Noah, I'll let you meet him. But there's one condition." "Name it," Ethan said, his voice calm but eager. "You don't tell him about the attack," Ava said. "He doesn't remember much from that day, and I don't want him triggered. You're just a guy looking to hire veterans. That's the story." "Agreed," Ethan said without hesitation. "When?" "Tomorrow," Ava said, her voice softening. 7 p.m. our place. Don't be late." She hung up, her hands shaking. As she set the phone down, Noah stirred on the couch, murmuring something in his sleep, and Ava watched him, her heart aching. She didn't trust Ethan Brooks, not yet, but she trusted her love for her brother. If this was a chance to save him, she'd take it, no matter the cost. The next evening, Ethan arrived at the address Ava had texted, rundown apartment building in the Bronx. Its facade crumbling, its hallway lit by flickering bulbs. He knocked. On the door of apartment 3B, his pulse quickening as Ava opened it, her face guarded, her sweater covering her wrists. "He's having a good day," she whispered, stepping aside. "Stick to the script." Ethan nodded, stepping into the small living room. Noah Bennett sat in a worn armchair, his frame large but thinner than Ethan remembered, his eyes hollow, but alert. A scar curved above his right eyebrow, a silent testament to the day their lives had collided. "Mr. Brooks," Noah said, standing with a slight tremble, offering a hand. "Ava says you're hiring veterans. I appreciate the chance, but I'm not exactly top shape these days." Ethan shook his hand, the grip strong but unsteady, and sat across from him, his heart pounding. "It's good to meet you, Noah," he said, his voice smooth despite the memories flooding back. "I've worked with a lot of military folks. I'm looking for people with real experience." Ava hovered near the kitchen, her eyes darting between them, her tension palpable. The apartment was sparse, its furniture secondhand, its air heavy with the weight of survival. Pill bottles lined the counter, a chair blocked the front door, a makeshift barrier against Noah's nightmares. Ethan forced himself to focus, asking Noah about his service, his skills, keeping the conversation light. But his eyes kept drifting to Ava, her quiet strength, her fierce protection of the man who'd saved his life. As the conversation wound down, Noah excused himself to the bathroom, leaving Ethan and Ava alone. "He seems okay," Ethan said quietly, glancing at the closed door. "He's not," Ava said, her voice low. "Good days don't last." "You still want to help?" "More than ever," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "I know a doctor, Dr. Samuel Carter. He's the best for combat PTSD. Let me set it up." Ava hesitated, her fingers brushing her wrist, then nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this doesn't mean I trust you." Ethan smiled faintly, respecting her honesty. "Fair enough," he said, "one step at a time." As he left the apartment, the city's lights flickered below, indifferent to the debt he carried, the connection he'd found, and the woman whose strength was rewriting the rules of his world. The rain fell in a steady whisper, streaking the diner's windows and blurring the neon glow of the Manhattan street outside. Inside, the air was warm, heavy with the scent of frying eggs and stale coffee. Ava Bennett moved through the morning, rush with practiced ease, balancing plates of pancakes and refilling mugs for the regulars who filled the vinyl booths. Her navy apron was stained with grease, her brown hair tucked into a loose ponytail, and her long sleeves carefully covered. The fading bruises on her wrists, the marks from Noah's last episode, were lighter now, but the weight of his pain lingered, a shadow she carried through every shift. It had been 3 days since Ethan Brooks sat in her brother's cramped apartment, offering a lifeline she hadn't dared to hope for. Dr. Samuel Carter, a PTSD specialist Ethan knew, had called yesterday, arranging an initial consultation for Noah at a private facility upstate. Ava had agreed, her voice steady over the phone, but now, as she poured coffee for a trucker at the counter, doubt gnawed at her. Accepting Ethan's help felt like stepping onto a tightrope. One misstep, and she could lose the independence she'd fought for since her parents' death 6 years ago. A hand brushed her arm, pulling her from her thoughts. Elena Torres, her co-worker and friend, leaned against the counter, her dark eyes bright with mischief. "You're a million miles away, Ava," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "That rich guy got you distracted?" Ava rolled her eyes, setting the coffee pot down. He's not that rich guy, Elena. He's just helping with Noah. Helping, huh? Elena grinned, nudging her. Louise says he's trouble. Billionaires don't hang out in diners unless they want something. Louise worries too. Much, Ava said, though her stomach twisted. She glanced at the corner booth, half expecting Ethan to be there, but it was empty. He hadn't returned since their meeting at the apartment, respecting the space she'd demanded. Yet his absence felt louder than his presence, a reminder of the card in her pocket, its edges worn from her restless fingers. Elena's expression softened. Hey, I saw that flyer for the small business grant on the bulletin board. You should apply. Your bookstore dream? It's time, Ava. Ava hesitated, her fingers brushing the counter. The idea of New Haven Books, a cozy bookstore cafe inspired by her parents' long-gone shop, had been a quiet ember since college. But life, Noah's discharge, her parents' accident, double shifts at the diner had buried it. I don't. Well, she said, it's a long shot. Long shots are your specialty, Elena said, handing her a plate of toast. Think about it. Ava nodded, tucking the thought away as she returned to work. But Elena's words lingered, a spark, against the gray of her routine. By noon, the rush had slowed, and Ava slipped into the break room, pulling out her phone. A text from Ethan waited. Dr. Carter confirmed Noah's consult for tomorrow. I can drive you both. Let me know. Her thumb hovered over the screen, torn between gratitude and suspicion. She typed a reply, "We'll meet you there. Thanks," and hit send before she could overthink it. That evening, Ava stood outside Noah's apartment, her coat damp from the drizzle. Noah opened the door, his frame filling the threshold, his eyes wary but clearer than they'd been in weeks. You sure about this, doctor? He asked, his voice rough. I don't need some shrink poking around my head. It's just a talk, Ava said, stepping inside. Dr. Carter's supposed to be good. Ethan says he's helped a lot of veterans. Noah's jaw tightened at Ethan's name. What's his deal anyway? Showing up out of nowhere, offering jobs, doctors. You trust him? Ava hesitated, the question echoing her own doubts. I don't know, she admitted. But he's serious about helping you. And we can't keep going like this, Noah. Noah looked away, his hand brushing the scar above his eyebrow, a habit when he was uneasy. I don't want to hurt you again, he said, his voice barely audible. Last time. It wasn't you, Ava said firmly, touching his arm. Let's try this, for both of us. Noah nodded, but his tension lingered, a silent promise of the battle ahead. The next morning, the drive upstate was quiet, the rain giving way to a pale sun. Ethan waited outside the facility, a low, modern building nestled among pines, its glass facade reflecting the sky. He leaned against his sedan, his usual suit replaced by a sweater and jeans, his dark hair ruffled by the breeze. Ava's heart skipped, an unwelcome reaction she pushed down as she and Noah approached. Thanks for this, she said, her voice clipped, keeping distance. Ethan nodded, his eyes warm but respectful. Dr. Carter's waiting. I'll be here if you need me. Inside, Dr. Carter greeted them, his gray hair and calm demeanor easing Noah's tension. The consultation was brief, a mix of questions about Noah's symptoms, nightmares, flashbacks, episodes, and an outline of the treatment plan. Therapy, medication adjustments, and a possible inpatient stay. Noah listened, his hands clasped tightly, but when Dr. Carter suggested a week-long evaluation, he stood abruptly. No hospitals, he said, his voice sharp. They'll lock me up. It's not a hospital, Dr. Carter said gently. It's a place to stabilize, to learn tools to manage the episodes. Noah shook his head, heading for the door. Ava followed, her heart sinking. Noah, wait, she called, catching him outside. This could help. I'm not some lab rat, Noah snapped, then softened, seeing her face. I'll do the therapy, okay? But no locked doors." Ava nodded, swallowing her fear. Ethan approached, his expression cautious. "Everything okay?" he asked. "He's not ready for inpatient," Ava said, her voice low. "But he'll try. The outpatient stuff. That's a start," Ethan said, his tone encouraging. "I'll cover whatever he needs." Ava's eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You don't know us." Ethan hesitated, his gaze drifting to Noah, who was pacing near the car. "I owe him," he said quietly, "and I see what you're carrying. You don't have to do it alone." Ava's throat tightened, but she turned away, unwilling to let him see her waver. The drive back was tense, Noah silent in the back seat, Ava staring out the window. Ethan broke the quiet, asking Ava about her day at the diner, his voice light but probing. "It's just work," she said, but his attention drew out a small story about a regular who always tipped in quarters. For a moment, the car felt less like a battlefield, more like a shared space dot back in the city. Ava returned to the diner, her mind heavy but sparked by Elena's earlier words. During a lull, she pulled up the small business grant application. On her phone, her fingers trembling as she started typing. The dream of New Haven bookshelves of novels, cozy chairs, the smell of coffee felt closer, a flicker of hope against the gray. That night, as she locked up the diner, her phone buzzed with a text from Louise. "Saw a reporter sniffing around today. Blonde, asking about you and that CEO. Watch your back." Ava's stomach dropped. Claire Donovan, a journalist known for digging into high-profile lives, had been spotted near the diner before. The idea of her life, her bruises, Noah's struggle splashed across tabloids made her skin crawl. She walked home, the city's lights flickering like warnings, and found Noah awake, staring at the ceiling. "You okay?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Trying to be," he said, his voice raw. "That doctor, he didn't treat me like I'm broken. Maybe this could work." Ava squeezed his hand, hope and fear tangling in her chest. Ethan's offer was a lifeline, but it came with strings, his world, his attention, his past colliding with hers. And now, with Claire Donovan circling, the shadows felt closer than ever. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a crown of stars, its reflection shimmering in the glass walls of the grand ballroom, where chandeliers cast golden light over silk-draped tables. Ethan Brooks stood at the edge of the charity gala, his tailored black tuxedo immaculate, a glass of untouched champagne in his hand. The room buzzed with the city's elite executives, philanthropists, politicians mingling to the soft strains of a string quartet. Brooks Technologies was sponsoring the event, a fundraiser for veterans' mental health, but Ethan's focus wasn't on the speeches or the donations. His eyes kept drifting to Ava Bennett, who stood near a marble pillar, her emerald gown catching the light, her brown hair swept into a loose chignon. She looked radiant, but her posture was tense, her hands clasped tightly, a stranger in a world that wasn't hers. 3 weeks had passed since Noah Bennett's first consultation with Dr. Samuel Carter, and the progress was fragile but real. Noah attended outpatient therapy twice a week, his episodes less frequent, his eyes brighter. Ethan had driven Ava and Noah to the upstate facility for each session, the car rides becoming a quiet ritual. Their conversations had softened, touching on small things. Ava's love for old novels, Ethan's habit of sketching drones on napkins building a bridge neither acknowledged. When Ethan invited Ava to the gala, a gesture to share his world, she'd hesitated but agreed, her voice wary. Just this once. Mal, watching her navigate the crowd, he wondered if he'd made a mistake bringing her here. Ava felt the weight of every glance, the whispers trailing her like smoke. The gown, a loan from a designer Ethan knew, fit perfectly but felt like a costume, its elegance at odds with her dire apron. She clutched a glass of water, her fingers cold, her mind replaying a headline she'd seen that morning in a tabloid. Tech Titan's mystery woman. Who is Ethan Brooks's diner date? Claire Donovan, the journalist who'd been sniffing around the diner, had struck, her article thin on facts but heavy with insinuation. Ava's stomach churned at the thought of her life, Noah's struggles, her bruises laid bare for strangers to judge. Ethan approached, his smile warm but cautious. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, meant only for her. "Fine," Ava said, her tone clipped, echoing their first meeting. "Just not used to this." She gestured vaguely at the room, the diamonds glinting on wrists, the laughter too. "Polished to be real. You're doing great," Ethan said, his hand brushing her elbow, a gesture meant to comfort but sparking her tension. "Want to dance? Might take your mind off it." Ava shook her head, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I don't belong here, Ethan. Everyone's staring." "They're curious," he said, his voice gentle. "They see someone beautiful, confident. They see a waitress." Ava cut in, her voice sharp. "You're a mystery woman. I saw the article." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. "Claire Donovan's fishing." "It's noise, Ava. It doesn't mean anything. It means something to me," she said, her voice trembling. "Noah's name could end up in those papers. My life isn't a headline." Before Ethan could respond, a woman approached, her sleek blonde hair and tailored red dress exuding authority. Rebecca Larson, Ethan's CFO, smiled thinly, her eyes assessing Ava. "Ethan, you're neglecting our guests," she said, her tone light but pointed. "And this must be Ava. I've heard so much about you." Ava forced a smile, her grip tightening on her glass. "Nice to meet you," she said, though Rebecca's gaze felt like a scalpel. "Charming," Rebecca said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Ethan, a word? The board's concerned about Project Nexus. The glitch is costing us investors." Ethan nodded, his expression tightening. "I'll be there in a minute," he said, but Rebecca lingered, her attention shifting to Ava. "You must find all this overwhelming," Rebecca said, her voice syrupy. "Coming from, where was it? A diner. It's quite a leap." Ava's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "I manage," she said, her voice steady despite the sting. Rebecca's smile widened, predatory. "I'm sure. Ethan's always had a soft spot for causes." The word landed like a slap. Ava's eyes narrowed, her voice low. "I'm not a cause, Ms. Larson, and I'm not here for your approval." Rebecca's eyebrow arched, but before she could reply, Ethan stepped between them. "Enough, Rebecca," he said, his voice firm. "Ava, let's get some air." Ava didn't move, her eyes locked on Rebecca's. "I can handle myself," she said, turning to Ethan. "But I'm done here." She set her glass on the table and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble, the crowd parting like a sea. Ethan followed, catching her in the lobby. It's quite a stark contrast to the ballroom's hum. "Ava, wait," he called, his voice urgent. "I'm sorry." Rebecca was out of line. "She's not wrong," Ava said, spinning to face him, her eyes glistening. "I don't fit here, Ethan. Your world, your people, they see me as a charity case. And I'm not your project to fix." "You're not," Ethan said, stepping closer, his voice raw. "I invited you because I want you here with me. Not as a project, as you." Ava's throat tightened, his words stirring something she wasn't ready to name. "Then why didn't you say that in there?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You let her talk like I'm nothing." Ethan's face fell, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I should have stopped her," he admitted. "I was caught off guard. It won't happen again." Ava shook her head, stepping back. "I need to go," she said, her voice firm. "This was a mistake." She left before he could respond. the cool night air hitting her like a wave as she stepped onto the sidewalk. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, a text from Luis Alvarez. Saw another article. You okay? She didn't reply, hailing a cab to escape the city's glare. Back at the diner the next day, Ava buried herself in work, her apron a shield against the world. Elena noticed her silence, slipping her a flyer for the small business grant. You didn't apply yet? Elena asked, leaning against the counter. Come on, Ava. You're meant for more than this. Ava took the flyer, her fingers tracing the words. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, Noah asleep on the couch, and opened her laptop. The grant application stared back, a daunting maze of questions, but she started typing, her words spilling out. A vision for New Haven Books, a place of stories and second chances. As she hit submit, her phone lit up with a notification, a new article by Claire Donovan. Brooks's Diner Darling, a waitress or a gold digger? Ava's stomach dropped, the words blurring with her fears. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his office, the city's lights cold beyond the glass. Project Nexus, a flagship AI system, had crashed during a demo, costing millions and shaking investor confidence. Rebecca's voice echoed from the board meeting. You're distracted, Ethan. This woman isn't worth it. He defended. Ava, but the damage was done. His phone held a drafted text error. I'm sorry. Can we talk? But he didn't send it. Respecting her silence. Upstate, Noah sat in Dr. Carter's office, his hands clasped tightly. I remembered something today, he said, his voice steady but raw. A guy in a suit in a bunker. I pushed him down. Then pain. It's blurry, but it's there. Dr. Carter nodded, making a note. That's progress, Noah. Your mind's starting to process. Noah exhaled, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He didn't know the man was Ethan, but the memory was a crack in the wall of his trauma, a step toward healing. That night, he called. Ava, his voice lighter. Therapy's not so bad, he said. Maybe I can do this. Ava smiled, tears prickling her eyes. You're doing it, Noah, she said, her voice thick. But as she hung up, her thoughts drifted to Ethan, his absence. A quiet ache. The gala had exposed the chasm between their worlds, but Noah's progress was a tether to him, a debt she couldn't ignore. Claire's articles, Rebecca's scorn, her own fears, they loomed like shadows, but Ava's resolve hardened. She'd build her dream, protect her brother, and decide for herself what Ethan Brooks meant to her. The autumn air was sharp, carrying the scent of damp leaves and city grit as Ava Bennett stood outside a narrow storefront in Brooklyn, its windows papered over, its faded sign barely legible. The keys in her hand were cold, their weight a quiet promise. She'd signed the lease for New Haven Books that morning, using every cent of her savings and the small business grant she'd won on her own merit. The space was a shell-cracked floors, peeling paint, but to Ava, it was a canvas. A chance to build something that wasn't defined by bruises or survival. She unlocked the door, the creak echoing in the empty room, and stepped inside, her sneakers leaving prints in the dust. 3 weeks had passed since the charity gala, where Rebecca Larson's barbed words and Ava's own fears had driven a wedge between her and Ethan Brooks. She hadn't seen him since, his texts unanswered, his absence a dull ache she buried under double shifts at the diner and late-night planning for the bookstore. Noah's progress in therapy was her anchor, his episodes rarer, his voice steadier during their calls. But Ethan's role in that progress, his quiet insistence on helping, lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. At the diner, Ava's coworkers noticed her focus. Elena Torres slipped her a sketch of a bookstore logo, a tree with open books, as leaves during a slow afternoon. For New Haven Books, Elena said, her eyes bright. You're doing it, Ava. Ava smiled, tucking the sketch into her apron. It's just a start, she said, but the words felt real, a spark against the gray of her routine. Luis Alvarez, wiping down the counter, watched her closely. "You're different lately," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "That CEO still sniffing around?" "No," Ava said, her tone firm, though her chest tightened. "I told him. I needed space." Luis nodded, but his skepticism lingered. "Good. Guys like that always have an angle. Just be careful." Ava didn't argue, her thoughts drifting to a tabloid article she'd seen yesterday by Claire Donovan, Brooks's Waitress, using a billionaire to save her troubled brother. The piece was vicious, twisting Noah's PTSD into a scandal, hinting at Ava's ulterior motives. She'd torn the paper in half, her hands shaking, but the words clung to her, a reminder of the world she'd glimpsed at the gala. Across the city, Ethan sat in his penthouse office, the skyline a cold mosaic. Beyond the glass, Brooks Technologies was reeling from Project Nexus's failure, a software glitch that had cost millions and shaken investor confidence. Rebecca Larson's warnings echoed in board meetings. "Your focus is slipping, Ethan." He'd pushed back, defending his veteran hiring program, inspired by Noah's struggle. The initiative, offering tailored roles for returning soldiers, was gaining traction, with Ethan consulting Dr. Samuel Carter to ensure it met real needs. But his drive came at a cost: sleepless nights, unanswered texts to Ava, and a growing ache he couldn't name. He opened his laptop, pulling up a photo from the gala. Ava in her emerald gown, her eyes fierce despite the crowd's scrutiny. He'd wanted to protect her, to show her his world could be hers, but he'd failed, letting Rebecca's venom go unchecked. His thumb hovered over her number, but he closed the phone, honoring her request for space. Instead, he drafted an email to his team, outlining a new phase for the veteran program. Transitional workspaces for those with PTSD. It was something tangible, a way to honor Noah's sacrifice, even if Ava kept him at arm's length. Upstate, Noah prepared for his first weekend visit home, cleared by Dr. Carter after weeks of steady progress. Ava met him at the facility, her heart lifting at his small smile, his scar above his eyebrow softened by the autumn light. "Ready to see the city?" she asked, helping him into her borrowed car. "Ready to sleep somewhere that's not a bunk?" Noah said, his voice lighter than she'd heard in months. They drove to her new apartment, a modest one-bedroom near the bookstore, its walls bare but clean. Noah settled on the couch, his duffel bag at his feet, and Ava cooked his favorite spaghetti with their mom's recipe filling the space with warmth. That night, as they ate, Noah's hands shook slightly, his fork clinking against the plate. Ava's stomach twisted, recognizing the signs. "You okay?" she asked, her voice steady. "Just tired," Noah said, but his eyes darted to the door, a reflex from his episodes. After dinner, he fell asleep, but Ava stayed awake, watching him, her heart racing when he murmured in his sleep, his hands twitching. She braced for a scream, a swing, but he settled, his breathing slowing. She exhaled, relief mingling with fear. His progress was real, but fragile, a tightrope she walked alone. The next morning, Noah seemed steadier, helping Ava unpack boxes for the bookstore. "This place is yours," he said, running a hand over the dusty shelves. "Mom and Dad would be proud." Ava's throat tightened, a memory surfacing. Her parents' bookstore, its wooden floors creaking under her childhood feet, her dad reading to her in a worn armchair. She'd found a photo of them last week, tucked in an old book, and the grief had hit fresh. "I hope so," she said, her voice thick. Her phone buzzed, a text from Luis. That reporter was back, asking about Noah's military record. "Stay sharp." Ava's grip tightened, Claire Donovan's shadow looming larger. She didn't tell Noah, not wanting to unsettle him, but the violation stung. Her brother's pain reduced to gossip. That afternoon, Ethan called, his voice cautious. "Dr. Carter said Noah's visiting. I was going to stop by the facility to talk to the veterans group. Should I stay away? Ava hesitated, her resolve wavering. It's fine, she said. Noah's doing okay. You can come by if you want. Ethan arrived at her apartment that evening, his presence filling the small space. Noah shook his hand, unaware of their shared past, and thanked him for the treatment. It's helping, Noah said, his voice raw. More than I thought it. Wold. Ethan nodded, his eyes flicking to Ava. I'm glad, he said, his tone genuine. They talked briefly, Noah mentioning a memory from therapy, a bunker, a man in a suit without connecting it to Ethan. Ava watched, her heart pounding, the secret of their past a weight she carried alone. After Noah went to bed, Ethan lingered, his hands in his pockets. You've done a lot for him, he said, his voice soft. And the bookstore, I drove by the storefront. It's going to be something special. Ava's chest ached, his words stirring the ember of their connection. Thanks, she said, her voice quiet. But I'm doing this on my own. I know, Ethan said, his eyes holding hers. I respect that. He left, the door clicking shut, and Ava stood in the silence, her fingers brushing the photo of her parents on the counter. Claire's articles, Noah's fragility, Ethan's absence. They pressed against her. But the bookstore was her ground, a dream she'd fight for. She didn't know what Ethan meant to her, not yet, but she knew she needed to find herself before she could find him. The late October sun hung low, painting the upstate treatment facility's pines in shades of amber and gold. Ava Bennett stood in the facility's garden, her coat pulled tight against the crisp air, her breath visible as she watched Noah Bennett walk the gravel path with Dr. Samuel Carter. Noah's shoulders were straighter, his steps steadier, a quiet testament to 6 weeks of therapy. His PTSD wasn't gone, nightmares still woke him. His hands still trembled at loud noises, but the hollow look in his eyes had softened, replaced by flickers of the brother Ava remembered. She clutched a thermos of coffee, its warmth grounding. But her thoughts drifted to Ethan Brooks, whose black sedan had just pulled into the parking lot. A month had passed since Ava had asked for space after the charity gala, a decision that felt right but left an ache she couldn't name. Ethan had respected her silence, his text limited to updates about Noah's treatment or the veteran hiring program at Brooks Technologies. Yet his absence had carved a space in her life, filled by the grind of diner shifts and the slow transformation of New Haven books. The bookstore's shelves were now half-built, its walls primed for paint, a dream taking shape. But Claire Donovan's latest article, Waitress's Wounded Brother, Ethan Brooks's redemption play, had reignited Ava's fears, her brother's pain twisted into tabloid fodder. She'd ignored the headlines, but they lingered, a shadow over her progress. Ethan approached, his usual suit replaced by a navy sweater, his dark hair ruffled by the breeze. Ava, he said, his voice warm but cautious, his hands in his pockets. Good to see you. You too, Ava said, her tone softer than she intended. She nodded toward Noah. He's doing better. Thanks for everything. Ethan's eyes followed Noah, a flicker of relief crossing his face. Dr. Carter says he's making real progress. I'm glad I can help. Ava studied him, searching for the billionaire she'd pushed away, but found only the man who'd sat in her apartment, listening to Noah's halting words. You didn't have to come today, she said. The veterans group doesn't need you babysitting. I wanted to, Ethan said, meeting her gaze. I thought maybe we could talk. Before Ava could respond, Dr. Carter waved them over, Noah trailing behind. The session was a group discussion for veterans, and Ethan had been invited to share insights from his company's hiring program. Inside the facility's meeting room, a dozen men and women sat in a circle, their faces etched with stories Ava recognized in Noah's eyes. Ethan spoke briefly, his voice steady, outlining jobs tailored for those with PTSD, flexible hours, quiet workspaces, mental health support. The veterans listened, some nodding, others skeptical, but Ethan's sincerity held the room. Noah raised his hand, his voice rough but clear. I remembered something in therapy, he said, glancing at Ethan. A bunker, a guy in a suit. I pushed him down, then pain. It's blurry, but it feels important. Ava's heart stopped, her eyes darting to Ethan, who kept his expression neutral. That's powerful, Noah, Ethan said, his voice calm. Memory's a tricky thing, but you're doing the work. The session ended, and Dr. Carter asked Noah for a private follow-up, leaving Ava and Ethan in the hallway. Ava's hands tightened on her thermos, the weight of Noah's memory pressing against her. He's getting closer to remembering you, she said, her voice low. What happens when he does? We'll handle it, Ethan said, his tone reassuring. One step at a time. Ava nodded, but her guard wavered, Ethan's presence stirring the connection she'd tried to bury. I saw the article, she said, changing the subject. Claire Donovan's not letting up. Ethan's jaw tightened. She's chasing clicks. I've got my team handling it. You don't have to deal with her alone. I'm not alone, Ava said, her voice firm, but her eyes softened. I appreciate you checking. A small smile curved Ethan's lips, the first crack in there. Careful distance. Before they could say more, Noah returned, his expression lighter. Dr. Carter thinks I'm ready for more visits home, he said, looking at Ava. And? I owe you both for this. Ava's throat tightened, and she hugged him, his arms strong but gentle. You're doing the work, Noah, she said, her voice thick. Noah glanced at Ethan, a glint of mischief in his eyes. You know, Ava, you used to talk about this guy back in college, he said, catching her off guard. Some business lecture. Ethan Brooks, the tech guy with big ideas. You had his magazine cover taped to your dorm wall. Ava's face flushed, her eyes widening. Noah, she hissed, mortified, as Ethan's eyebrow arched, his grin widening. Really? Ethan said, his tone teasing but warm. A magazine cover? It was for a class, Ava said quickly, her cheeks burning. Business ethics. I admired your ideas. Noah chuckled, a rare sound that warmed the sterile hallway. Sure, ideas. You asked him a question at that seminar, didn't you? Something about ethics in crisis tech? Ava groaned, covering her face, but Ethan's expression shifted, a memory dawning. Wait, he said, his voice soft. Left side of the lecture hall, short hair, glasses. You were the one who stumped me about crisis response ethics. I looked for you afterward. Ava stared, stunned. You remember that? I wanted to offer you an internship, Ethan said. His eyes locked on hers. You disappeared. The revelation hung between them, a thread connecting their pasts, fragile but undeniable. Ava's heart pounding, her college crush a secret now laid bare by Noah's memory. Life got in the way, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Noah cleared his throat, breaking the moment. I'm starving, he said, grinning. Any chance we're eating tonight? Ava seized the chance to shift gears. My place, she said, glancing at Ethan. If you're free, come. Nothing fancy. Ethan nodded, his smile warm. I'd like that. That evening, Ava's small apartment glowed with the clatter of pots and laughter, the small space alive with the scent of her mother's recipe for chili. Noah set the table, his movements careful but confident, while Ethan chopped peppers, his sleeves rolled up, looking less like a CEO and more like a friend. Ava stirred the pot, stealing glances at them, the surreal warmth of her brother joking with the man who'd saved his life and hers, in a way she wasn't ready to admit. Over dinner, they talked about small things, Noah's love for old westerns, Ethan's failed attempt at gardening, Ava's vision for New Haven books, When Noah mentioned a job offer from Ethan's veteran program, Ava's eyes flicked to Ethan, surprised. "Director of Veteran Integration," Noah said, his voice proud. "Helping guys like me find their way." "That's incredible," Ava said, her voice thick with pride. She looked at Ethan, her guard softening. "You didn't tell me." "It's Noah's news," Ethan said, his eyes warm. "He's earned it." After dinner, Noah retreated to the couch, claiming he needed a nap, though his grin suggested he was giving them space. Ava and Ethan stood in the kitchen, the city's lights flickering through the window. "You've done a lot for him," Ava said, her voice quiet. "And I saw the storefront. You drove by?" "Couldn't resist," Ethan admitted, leaning against the counter. "It's going to be amazing, Ava. You're building something real." Ava's chest ached, his words stirring the ember of their bond. "I checked with the grant committee," she said, her voice hesitant. "They said it was all on merit, no strings." "I wouldn't have interfered," Ethan said, his gaze steady. "I respect you too much." The sincerity in his eyes cracked her resolve, but a text from Luis interrupted. "Claire's digging into Noah's records again. Be careful." Ava's stomach twisted, the shadow of scrutiny looming. "Thanks for tonight," she said, stepping back. It meant a lot to Noah. "And to me," Ethan said, his voice soft. He left, the door clicking shut, and Ava stood in the quiet, her fingers brushing the chili pot, still warm. The past her college crush, her parents' bookstore felt closer, tangled with the present, and Ethan was at the heart of it, a connection she couldn't ignore. The December chill seeped through the city, frosting the windows of the elegant venue where Brooks Technologies hosted its annual charity gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the polished wood floors, and the hum of conversation mingled with the clink of glasses and the soft jazz from a live quartet. Ethan Brooks stood near a towering Christmas tree adorned with silver ornaments, his black tuxedo tailored to his frame, his dark hair neatly combed. The event was a celebration of the company's veteran hiring program, now a national model. But Ethan's thoughts were elsewhere, anchored to Ava Bennett, who stood across the room in a sapphire gown that hugged her figure, her brown hair cascading in soft waves. 2 months had passed at dinner in Ava's apartment, where Noah's revelation about her college crush had cracked the distance between them. Since then, Ethan and Ava had navigated a cautious reconnection, their bond deepening through shared visits to Noah's treatment facility and quiet moments planning New Haven books. The bookstore was nearly complete, its shelves stocked, its cafe counter ready for opening next week. But Claire Donovan's articles persisted. The latest Brooks's redemption romance, a waitress's rise or a PR stunt, stoking Ava's fears of being seen as Ethan's project. Tonight, she'd agreed to attend the gala, a step into his world, but her eyes betrayed a wariness Ethan ached to ease. Ava sipped a glass of sparkling water, her fingers tracing the rim as she scanned the crowd. The memory of Rebecca Larson's scorn at the last gala lingered, but Rebecca had apologized weeks ago, admitting her misjudgment after seeing Ethan's commitment to Ava. Still, Ava felt the weight of every glance, the whispers of guests wondering who she was. Luis Alvarez's warning echoed. "They'll never see you as one of them." She straightened, her resolve firm. She was here for Ethan, for Noah, and for herself, not to prove anything to strangers. Ethan approached, his smile warm, his hand brushing hers. "You look incredible," he said, his voice low, meant only for her. "Thanks," Ava said, her lips curving slightly. "This place is a lot." "You're handling it better than I am," Ethan said, his eyes teasing but sincere. "Want to escape for a minute?" Before Ava could reply, a woman in a sleek black dress approached. Claire Donovan, her blonde hair pinned up, a notebook tucked under her arm. "Mr. Brooks, Miss Bennett," she said, her smile sharp. Mind if I ask? A few questions for my column? Ava's stomach dropped, her grip tightening on her glass. Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. Not tonight, Claire. This is a private event. Claire's eyebrow arched, undeterred. The public's curious about your partnership. Miss Bennett, how does it feel to go from diner shifts to galas? Quite a Cinderella story. Ava's jaw tightened, but she met Claire's gaze. I'm not here for a story, she said, her voice steady. I'm here for the veterans, like my brother. Claire's smile didn't waver, but she nodded, stepping back. Fair enough. Enjoy the evening. She melted into the crowd, leaving a chill in her wake. Ethan's hand found Ava's, his touch grounding her. You okay? He asked, his eyes searching hers. I will be, Ava said, exhaling. She's relentless. She's irrelevant, Ethan said, his voice firm. You're what matters. Ava's heart fluttered, his words a balm against her fears. Before she could respond, the MC called Ethan to the stage to announce the veteran program's expansion. He squeezed her hand and climbed the steps, his presence commanding the room. This program isn't just about jobs, he said, his voice clear. It's about recognizing the strength of those who've served, who've carried more than we can imagine. I owe it to a man who saved my life, and to someone who taught me what courage looks like. He paused, his eyes finding Ava's, and the crowd followed his gaze. Ava Bennett, he said, his voice softening. You've shown me that the strongest people don't just survive. They build, they dream, they heal. This program is inspired by you. The room erupted in applause, but Ava's breath caught, her eyes glistening. Ethan descended, pulling her into a quiet corner as the quartet resumed. I meant every word, he said, his voice low, his hands framing her face. I love you, Ava. I want you in my life, not as a story, but as my partner. Ava's throat tightened, her fears warring with the warmth in his eyes. Ethan, she whispered, I'm scared. Your world, the headlines, it's so much. I know, he said, his forehead resting against hers. But it's our world. If you'll have me, I'll fight for us every day. She closed her eyes, her heart surrendering to the truth she'd felt since their dinner. I love you too, she said, her voice breaking. Their kiss was soft, a promise sealed under the twinkling lights, oblivious to the cameras capturing. Their embrace dot the next day. Ava returned to the diner, her apron a familiar weight. Elena Torres grinned, tossing her a newspaper with a photo of the kiss. Tech billionaire's heart captured at gala. Cinderella strikes again. Elena teased, but Ava laughed, the sting of Claire's words dulled by Ethan's love dotted new. Avon books, the final touches were in place, wooden floors polished, books arranged, a cafe counter gleaming. Ava stood in the center, her fingers brushing a shelf, a photo of her parents propped nearby. Their bookstore had been her childhood haven, and now she'd built her own. Noah arrived, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his scar softened by a rare smile. Looks like home, he said, hugging her. You did it, Ava. You helped, she said, her voice thick. Noah's progress was steady. He'd moved into an apartment near Brooks Technologies, where he'd start as director of veteran integration next month. He'd begun dating a woman from his therapy group, a quiet connection that gave him hope. That evening, Ethan arrived at the bookstore carrying a small box. For you, he said, handing it to Ava. Inside was a document. Foundation in her parents' name, the Bennett Family Literacy Project, to fund independent bookstores. To honor what they started, Ethan said, his voice soft. Noah can run it, if he wants, when he's ready. Ava's eyes filled with tears, her fingers tracing the paper. Ethan, this is everything, she said, pulling him into a hug. Thank you. Their moment was interrupted by a letter slipped under the door. addressed to Ava. She opened it, her heart sinking as she read. A veteran from Noah's group, critical of Ethan's program, claiming it exploited soldiers for PR. They don't. No, you, Ethan said, reading over her shoulder, his voice firm. We'll prove them wrong. Ava nodded, but the words stung, a reminder of the scrutiny they faced. At Brooks Technologies, Ethan faced his own battle. The board, led by Rebecca, had questioned his focus, citing Project Nexus's losses. In a tense meeting, Ethan defended his priorities, his voice unwavering. This company isn't just about profit. It's about impact. The veteran program stays. The board relented, impressed by his resolve, and Rebecca offered a quiet nod of respect. Back at the bookstore, Ava and Ethan sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes, planning the opening. Noah joined them, bringing coffee from the diner, and for a moment, the world felt small, safe, theirs. Ava looked at Ethan, his hand in hers, and felt the weight of her fears lift. They'd face the headlines, the critics, the future together. The Brooklyn street glowed under a December sky, snowflakes drifting like confetti as New Haven Books stood radiant at the corner, its large windows spilling warm light onto the sidewalk. The storefront, once a dusty shell, now brimmed with life wooden. Shelves packed with novels, cozy armchairs tucked into nooks, and a cafe counter wafting the scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. A hand-painted sign above the door read Grand Opening. Welcome home. Its letters uneven but vibrant, crafted by Ava Bennett with help from Elena Torres. The crowd outside buzzed softly, locals, friends, and a few curious passers-by clutching paper cups of hot cocoa, their laughter mingling with the carols drifting from a speaker. Ava stood inside, her sapphire sweater hugging her 3-month pregnant frame, her brown hair loose, her silver bracelet, a gift from Ethan Brooks, glinting under the lights. At 28, she felt the weight of her dream realized. A bookstore cafe born from her parents' legacy and her own resilience. Yet her heart raced, a mix of pride and nerves. The opening was more than a business launch. It was a declaration of who she was, beyond the diner apron, beyond Claire Donovan's headlines. She smoothed her sweater, her hand lingering on her belly, a quiet fear surfacing. Can I be a mother and keep this alive? Ethan approached, his tailored blazer open, his smile steadying her. You did it, he said, his voice low, his hand finding hers. This place, it's you. We did it, Ava corrected, her eyes softening. She glanced at Noah Bennett, who was arranging pastries at the cafe counter, his scar above his eyebrow softened by a grin. Noah's recovery had been a beacon. Through their journey, his role as Director of Veteran Integration at Brooks Technologies and now manager of the Bennett Family Literacy Foundation, a testament to his strength. Tonight, he'd share his story at the opening, a moment Ava both dreaded and cherished. Luis Alvarez pushed through the door, a box of sandwiches in his arms. Catering's here, he said, winking at Ava. Alana's parking. This place looks like a dream, Ava. Thanks, Luis, Ava said, her voice thick. Luis and Elena had been her anchors at the diner, their support unwavering through the grant application, the lease, the endless renovations. Now, as New Haven Books came to life, they were family, part of the home she'd built. The opening began with a soft chime, Ava stepping to a small podium, her hands trembling slightly. Welcome to New Haven Books, she said, her voice clear. Despite her nerves, this place is for everyone who needs a story, a coffee, or just a moment to feel at home. It's for my parents, who taught me to love books, and for my brother, who taught me to keep fighting. The crowd applauded, and Ava's eyes found Noah, who nodded, his pride palpable. He took the podium, his large frame steady, his voice raw but strong. A year ago, I was lost, he said, his eyes scanning the room. PTSD from my service took everything, my job, my hope. even my sister's safety. But with help, therapy, family, second chances, I'm here. This bookstore, this foundation, it's about giving others that chance. Ava's throat tightened, tears prickling as the crowd clapped, some wiping their eyes. Noah's words were a bridge, connecting their pain to others' hope. A woman approached him afterward, introducing herself as Sophia, a regular from his therapy group. Their quiet conversation, her hand brushing his, hinted at a new chapter for Noah, one Ava hadn't expected but welcomed. Ethan joined Ava, his arm around her shoulders. "He's incredible," he said, his voice soft. "And so are you." Ava leaned into him, her fears easing. But a flicker of doubt lingered, voiced in a quiet moment by the cafe counter. "What if I can't do this?" she said, her hand on her belly. "The bookstore, a baby, it's so much." Ethan knelt before her, his eyes steady. "You've built a home from nothing," he said. "You'll be an amazing mother, and I'll be here, every step." Noah overheard, joining them with a grin. "You're stuck with us, Ava," he said, his voice light. "Kid's gonna have the best uncle." Ava laughed, the tension breaking, her fears softened by their love. The evening unfolded in warmth, kids flipping through picture books, locals chatting over coffee, Elena and Luis serving sandwiches. A small ceremony followed, Ava and Ethan unveiling a plaque by the door, in memory of Thomas and Ellen Bennett, who taught us every story begins with a page. The crowd clapped, and Ava's eyes met Ethan's, their shared past her parents. Bookstore, his first job there, woven into this moment. As the night wound down, the crowd thinned, leaving Ava, Ethan, Noah, Luis, and Elena in the quiet store. They sat on the floor, eating leftover pastries, the city snow falling softly. "Outside. To new chapters," Noah said, raising a coffee cup. "To family," Ava added, her hand in Ethan's, her eyes on Noah. She thought of their journey, the Bruises, the diner, the gala, the countless nights of fear and hope. Ethan had seen her not as a waitress or a headline, but as herself, and together they built something lasting. "Are you okay?" Ava asked Ethan, her voice soft, echoing their first meeting. He smiled, his hand brushing her cheek. "I'm now," he said, his voice thick, a vow sealed in the glow of their home. This story is a tapestry of connection, weaving together the lives of those who've been bruised by circumstance, yet choose to heal through love and purpose. Ava Bennett, Ethan, and Noah embody the truth that family is forged not just by blood, but by choice, by seeing someone's pain, standing by them, and building a future together. Ava's journey from a waitress hiding her brother's wounds to a bookstore owner expecting a child speaks to resilience, the courage to dream despite loss. Ethan's transformation from a solitary billionaire to a partner and advocate reflects the power of empathy, while Noah's recovery honors the unseen battles of veterans, offering hope without erasing their scars. The story's heart lies in its recognition of small, persistent acts. Ethan's question in the diner, Ava's grant application, Noah's therapy sessions that ripple into profound change. It challenges us to look closer, to see the Avas and Noahs in our own lives, and to act with the compassion Ethan found within himself. New Haven Books stands as a symbol of second chances, a reminder that every story, no matter how broken, can begin again. For more tales of resilience, love, and chosen family, subscribe to Legacy Stories on our channel. Join a community that celebrates the human spirit, where every narrative inspires us to build our own new chapters. Your support keeps these stories alive. Let's create a world where every heart finds its home.